Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Paula Price. I'm with the People's Law School, and today's webinar is Getting Along with Your Ex. We have three wonderful speakers with us here today, Zara Suleiman, Shalina Nayalani, and Yuval Berger, and I'll introduce them formally in just a few minutes. Now, today's session, as you know, is about getting along with your ex. Our speakers are going to answer questions that come up in their practice. We are going to go through basically the three phases of a breakup, starting with that initial stage before the breakup, and then the process of actually breaking up, and then communication after the breakup has happened. What you can expect today is answers to your questions. We're sharing legal information, not legal advice, and it is current as of today. If what you're seeking is legal information or legal advice, we invite you to reach out to Zara or Shalina. Their contact information is on the screen, or legal counsel. Also of note today, we have a guest, Yuval Berger, who is a mental health professional. And so the information that he'll be sharing is not to be taken as a diagnosis or as specific advice. Again, we are focused today on providing information to help you navigate communication challenges. We would like to acknowledge we are grateful to work on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, whose people continue to live on and care for these lands. And I invite all of you who have joined today's webinar to take a moment to reflect on the history of the land from which you have joined us today. We would also like to thank our funders, the Department of Justice Canada, the Law Foundation of British Columbia, and the Notary Foundation, whose financial support makes production of these webinars possible. And finally, it's a pleasure to introduce our speakers. We are grateful to have them here with us today. I'll introduce them in the order in which they appear on the slide, starting with Zara Suleiman. Zara is a lawyer, mediator, and founder of Suleiman Family Law. Zara is a certified family law mediator and collaborative law practitioner and the founder of Suleiman Law. She is also an adjunct professor for family law at the University of Victoria Law School. She's on the board of the Law Foundation of British Columbia, a chair of a BC Law Institute research project on legal parentage, and on the advisory for the FRIDA Center for Research on Violence Against Women and Children. She has been working on issues of violence against women and children for over 30 years and has also presented and written extensively on family law issues, trauma-informed practice, and anti-racism critical race theory issues. We are delighted to have Zara with us here today. Zara, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with this group and to see everyone and to be a part of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zara. Next, we have Shalina Nayalani. Shalina is a lawyer, mediator, and coach, and the founder of Nayalani Mediation Law and Coaching. And Shalina has over 35 years of training and experience as a coach, counselor, mediator, social worker, and lawyer. Shalina has degrees from UBC in social work and law, and she's an accredited family law mediator and arbitrator, as well as a registered social worker. Shalina specializes in communication, well-being, and conflict resolution, making her a natural fit for today's conversation. Shalina, welcome to today's webinar. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then finally, we have Yuval Berger. And Yuval is a mental health professional and a registered social worker with over 25 years of clinical experience counseling individuals, couples, and families. Through his work at Hindsight Counseling, he supports couples and individuals through challenging transitions, fostering collaboration and connection instead of hostility and rage. Over the years, he has practiced as a child specialist, a divorce coach, a trainer and lecturer, and we are delighted to have Yuval share his unique perspective in today's conversation. So thank you so much, Yuval. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Paula. Thank you.
So we're going to turn to our questions, and the first question is for Zara. And Here it is. Once the divorce goes through, I never want to talk to my ex again. Is there any legal reason I can't just cut them out of my life?
All right. Well, I have to say this isn't an uncommon feeling that I hear from people that may not want to have any communication with their ex. And I'm just dealing with the legal aspect of it. So if you have a simple answer is if you have no children, if you have no family assets or property like a family residence or ownership of that needs to be dealt with, and you have no ongoing business, family businesses or business ventures that need to be dealt with, then you don't really have any legal entitlements or legal obligations to continue communication. That being said, the question really frames the idea of if once my divorce goes through. So what I want to be what's really important to say is that getting a divorce is about getting an order from the court that gets granted that says that I want a divorce, and you're asking the court, and the court gives you this order that says, okay, you're divorced, which means really once you get that order, it entitles you to get married again. But you still may have ongoing issues that need to be dealt with that are still in what you created a document maybe post separation, such as a separation agreement that deals with actually your ongoing issues that may go beyond the fact of getting a divorce. So for example, your separation agreement may outline how you're going to deal with ongoing family property that may or may be held for a while and not sold. You may have business ventures or shares being transferred. You may have other assets that need to be divided. So that actually might continue on. You might actually get an order for divorce saying that you're no longer married, so you can marry someone else. But your separation agreement really holds a lot of the communication regarding what kind of arrangements you still have an obligation to meet before you can stop communication with your ex partner. So that's the document I would look at. And so again, if you have no children, you won't be dealing with ongoing parenting issues or child support or other expenses regarding children. And again, if you've sold your property, you don't have any other property or investments that are tied to your ex-spouse, then you will not need to have any other communication. The counseling aspect of this, of course, Yuval's probably and Shalina better to address. But you won't have any legal obligations. That being said, the one other piece that may occur is that in your separation agreement, you might have built in some provisions for spousal support. And if you have spousal support built into your agreement, there may also be things such as a review period or ongoing disclosure or some form of contact that needs to be maintained for changes of address or different bank accounts for the transfer of those funds or other kinds of disclosure or connection. So if that's the case, then you may still have an obligation from the separation agreement to have some contact, albeit minimal. But other than that, again, no children, no business, no other family assets. And if all of the things that you agreed upon to complete in your separation agreement are completed, then legally you have you don't have any other obligations to communicate with your ex-partner.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sarah. Such a helpful answer. This next question is for Yuval. My spouse and I have been trying to stay together for the sake of our kids, but I can't do it much longer. What challenges might I expect post-divorce?
Okay, well, I often get that question, and sometimes, clients come to see me on the separation is on the brink, and they just want to kind of go with me through what can I expect. So this is a very accurate sort of state of mind. I first want to start by saying that, staying together for the sake of the children, it's often what I hear. And I find that decision to be psychologically very complex. I mean, you don't feel like you have somebody in the home who actually is a really loving, supportive partner, but you're staying there for the sake of the kids. Again, navigating it psychologically, how to do a good job and whether you're helping yourself or not, that's a very complex question. So I appreciate even coming to talk to me about that piece as well. But generally speaking, I think if I look at the different aspect of divorce, I would say in my experience that the first thing that people deal with is the emotional part of the separation. I think the first thing that they experience it's dealing with the multiple losses and other intense feeling they experience. So there are losses in all sort of front. There's the loss of the marriage, the loss of the dream, there's a loss of the friendship, there's a loss of sometimes identity. You come to kind of question actually who's your friend, and do I trust love, and do I trust, being in a relationship? So there's a lot of confusion. Now, it's hard to deal with losses because I think our mind takes time to really integrate those losses into our life. And I think that's the result of why heartache and, why there's so much confusion and feeling of kind of like either low-grade depression or full-blown depression. I think that the other feeling that often I hear from parents particularly is the feeling of guilt. Am I, by making this decision, or by my spouse, my ex-spouse now making that decision, what's going to be the impact on my children? And that's a feeling, parents do deeply care about the children. So they feel like they fail, they feel guilty, they feel if, whether I can save it or not, they have that question. By the way, not everyone will experience the same emotional reaction. Some people experience it in different times. Sometimes it's more delay, but generally speaking, in my practice, I have yet to see an easy divorce from an emotional perspective. I don't think it's an easy process. The other area that is challenging is figuring out the parenting piece, which is a very complex piece. I'm going to lose time with my children. How I'm going to navigate that? What the impact is going to be on my children? How can I maintain a secure bond with my child now when I'm not living in the same home? How am I going to negotiate parenting style? Differences in styles. And I think that, I think one of the biggest change the parents do not anticipate as they move into separation is that a lot of the parenting need to be now front loaded. Like you need to be more planning of how to do parenting. You need to discuss how things going to be done, versus when you live together, you don't have to have this kind of long conversation about, what are we going to do in the next spring break. After separation, you need to be a bit more organized and a bit more predictable in terms of how you're going to be parenting. Of course, there's the financial uncertainty that I think Delora is probably more capable of talking about that, but there's certainly a lot of fear, regardless of your income. Divorce is complex and it's expensive, so I think there's a lot of fear. I would say particularly to the one who has less financial knowledge, so, they deal with a lot of fear. But there's a good side, to what to expect, that, it's like an opportunity to reset your life. So I don't want to be just talking about the issues and the struggles. I think there's really opportunity to reset and to reinvent the self. Living a not so good relationship is a good thing, and it's a good thing for the self. So you can reinvent your life and you can have a bit more control over your life. So it's a mix of emotion, certainly not an easy one.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Yuval. And I think the way you described it is really helpful, and I think will resonate with anyone who's thinking about this, if they're at a stage where they're contemplating separation, to know that if any of what you've described is happening, that this is normal. This is a normal reaction, that they are not alone with that. Our next question is for you, Shalina. I'm so sorry. Shalina, I know I want to get divorced. What steps can I take now to do things as peacefully as possible during the divorce separation process and after? Does it make a difference if I use a mediator, traditional lawyer, or no collaborative lawyer, or no lawyer at all?
Okay, those are great questions. And I'm going to focus on the peaceful part first, because most people would like a separation process that's peaceful, if not amicable and civil. And it can be hard because they're big emotions, as we've heard earlier by my colleague talking about those emotions, especially in the beginning: anger, fear, hurt. And every situation is different. The relationship itself, the communication, the trust in the relationship, the reasons for the breakup are different. So for example, if there was someone stepped out of the marriage and there was an affair, that's going to be a very different breakup than if the spouses or the partners had, drifted apart and they'd gone through counseling. So, in terms of keeping it peaceful, there's a lot of things to consider, but there's some steps that I think would be really helpful. And one of them is counseling, either separately or with your partner. And I think, I always check with my clients, check in with them to see if separation is really what they want. Like, take a pause. Is the relationship fixable? What do you need to be happy? Do you need to reset? And what is it that you need? Doing a careful assessment. And obviously, this is not an easy decision. It's not a light decision. It has an impact, as we heard earlier, on children and others. So having that counseling, whether it's on your own or with your partner, can be really helpful. And if you decide that that's it, the marriage is over, you can continue that counseling in sort of an uncoupling, how you can work together to move forward in your relationship as two individuals outside of the relationship. So some simple tips, if you're done and you're not doing the counseling or you've done the counseling, I think you need to plan how you want to communicate this to your partner, how you'll do it, how you'll raise it. Think about safety considerations. Initial breakups have a high risk of family violence. Key messages that you might want to convey to your partner, that are authentic about the marriage or about, how you want to move forward. It could come as a big shock to them if you haven't done the counseling and if they're not aware of, that you want to you want out. And so I think being aware that they could react in a very unexpected or highly emotional way. They haven't had time to process this, so they may need space. You may need to keep in mind that things may be unexpected, and just try to be empathetic and compassionate in the moment, reassuring that they aren't going to, lose their kids. They're not going to be poor. They're not going to be, they may not be able to hear this if they're going through these strong emotions. And then with respect to lawyers, I just want to mention that as well. I think people do need to really understand their responsibilities and obligations. I don't think you can negotiate without understanding the lay of the land, so to speak. And so ideally, people would get that legal advice or the legal information. And I think in terms of processes, mediation and a collaborative process is I think it's seen as less threatening than, lowering up and, going to the court battle. And I think, in fact, it can be a much more peaceful process because you're working with a third-party professional, for example, in mediation, who's a accredited family law mediator, to help you resolve things, whether you're with lawyers or without lawyers. And in the collaborative process, the same. The separating couple is working with lawyers. They're having four-way meetings and bringing in specialists to deal with the financial and the emotional aspects, for the parents or the couple and children as well. And even if you end up going to a traditional lawyer and things are very conflictual to start, they may settle down. You may end up negotiating with your lawyer, but all lawyers are required to consider dispute resolution, and most things do settle. But so even if you are with a traditional lawyer, and even if you have lawyered up, things can settle and then things can resolve. And you don't necessarily have to go to court.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shalina. Much appreciated. This next question is for you, Val. My spouse and I are breaking up. I feel emotional almost all of the time, from angry to deeply sad. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is this normal?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Loss is a complex process. We're not as easy and not as nimble with, the brain cannot shift from one state to another state. Losing a primary relationship is complex, sad, and there are many losses. And it's not just on one topic. It's pervasive. It's kind of covers many aspects of our life. Again, think about, a few months ago, you shared your life with that person, you shared your dream with that person, you committed to have children with that person, and now you are feeling that, you actually on two different sides, at least at the beginning. That's how it feels. Not for everyone, but many times those are the feelings. So when we're dealing with that sort of kind of rapid change and integrating so many laws into our life, it takes time. Sometimes I talk about separation or loss as like pregnancy, I mean, there's no short pregnancy. There's no like, can I do it in 6 months or 3 months? It's like, it'll take its time. Usually I tell people that the first 3 months will be the hardest, but it's going to get better. You can expect that between 6 and 12 months, your life will be kind of always clouded by the experience. You would want to talk about it. You would want to mention it. You would want to tell your friends. You would dream about it. You might have a conversation with yourself in the car alone about it. So it's certainly going to occupy your thinking. Again, I would like you also to consider that, you know, there's a positive aspect in being able to stop a relationship that was not working well for you, because I think that's also have a quite big emotional impact. But there's a whole lot of things that you can do about, you know, making sure that that time gonna go, you know, I call it to lick your lick your wounds, you know. This is the time to use your social capital. Reach out to your friends. This is not the time to say, I don't want to burden my friends. This is the time to actually call your friends. Do call your friends. Do call your family. Of course, pick and choose the one who give you good advice, not the one who say, are you sure about it? Or, you know, or it's your fault. So, I mean, I'm just giving an example of the kind of connection that you would like to cultivate. Avoid using substance. That's a big one. I know in our culture, I mean, people kind of like to use substance sometimes. This is actually not a good way of dealing with it. It's actually going to make things worse. It will help you to, will interfere with regulating your emotions. It will probably intensify your emotions. You're not going to be more capable of dealing with those intense emotions. Be mindful of not using substance during that time or not using it excessively. I do suggest that you continue with your regular activities. Try to stick to, you know, the commitment you had, like yoga on Friday or Pilates on the weekend. If you can continue work after maybe a short period of like a break, then try and go back to your normal activities. It seemed that the normal activities help us to integrate the loss into our lives. So that's a good thing to do. Of course, I mean, you need to ask yourself whether you're capable of doing that. And also during that time, avoid the urge to make a big changes. So if you're just dealing with separation, this is not a good time to think about maybe you need to relocate to a different city or change your job or move. I would say wait with big decision until things kind of settle down. Again, it will settle down. Give it between 6 to 12 months. 12 months is the longer period, but usually it takes less than that. And you know that you over the difficult time when you stop telling stories about your life in reference to the divorce. Like at the beginning, almost everything about your life is in a reference to what just happened to me. And when you stop referring to that event in your life and you just talk about your life, you know, in general, without mentioning the divorce, that's a good sign. And of course, a good sign is that when you're ready to date again, if you care to date again, that's also a good sign. So.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Yuval. And I could see Zara and Shalina nodding their heads, especially when you were talking about that window of 6 to 12 months. So I think going into that with that expectation that it will take time and to allow the process to unfold on timeline. Shalina, the next question is for you. My spouse and I are in the process of breaking up. Our friendship group is deeply intertwined, and I'm worried that I'll lose my social life along with my marriage. How can we navigate conversations about how we'll interact with our mutual friends after the breakup is final?
So I had to think about that because I think we have also, all of us have probably experienced couples, our friends separating, and then as friends being on the other side, how we have navigated that. And, you know, I think there's no one right answer in terms of how to move forward with that. It depends on the couple. The breakup, is their fault? Is there blaming? Are friends taking sides? You know, in a perfect world, you know, the couple needs to have continuing relationships with friends because they need support through this transition. You need connection for the mental health. But even with the best of intentions and, you know, with little or no conflict, I think it's hard to share friends. And the friendships will change organically as people move through the separation because, you know, as Yuval mentioned earlier, you know, you're going through change. There is loss and your identity is changing. You may be moving. And so your friendships may change as well. You know, and I think some of that organic moving forward with friends also depends on the history of the relationships. Like you may, you know, you know, there may be a childhood friend that's the friend of one of the parties. There may be, you know, somebody that has more in common. because they run together, or, so there, some of that may happen. So I think one of the things that's really important is to be self-aware. Like, how are you really going to feel sharing your friends with the partner? Like, are you going to be able to trust the friends? Are you going to be, what's your expectations of the friends? Do you want them to be entirely loyal to you? Like, are you going to worry if they go out with the other person without you, that they're talking about you or breaching confidences about you? So I think you really need to know how you're really going to feel about that. I think it would be really wonderful to be able to have the conversation with your partner, but sometimes this is new, so you don't really know how things are going to shake out. And with the friends, maybe separately, about how they want to, like, to be able to have the open conversation so people can discuss what's going to be okay, what's not going to be okay. I think that would be really important. And I think the other thing that's important to consider is, the friends may initially want to be trying to get you back together, depending on what. So that may be different. Again, as you move through the process of separation, divorce, the friends will also evolve and move forward. And some of those relationships may not be as intense, and you may move on and have new friends and do things. But I think as you're going through this period of growth and loss, I think acknowledging those feelings of loss and making sure that you give yourself self-care and self-compassion. And you can't control how your friends are going to behave. You can't control, how your ex is going to behave. And it's just about, being able to manage yourself and your own, your actions around that, and even your emotions sometimes, being able to sort of deal with that, and to know that this is all normal and part of this process.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lena. I agree. It is a tough question. I think you handled it beautifully. This next question is for you, Zara. My spouse and I separated 3 months ago. We have 2 kids, ages 4 and 6. Every time we see each other, our conversations escalate into a shouting match. I don't think it's good for the kids to see us like this. What tips do you have for us to communicate better?
Well, thank you for this. I think this is a really complex question. And so I think there's lots to unpack, and more, and all these questions, there's probably more questions. I'd start off by saying yes, in terms of the gut. What's embedded in the question is that, this isn't good for the children to witness. And yes, it's not good for the children. It's not good for the children to be in the middle of conflict or yelling or screaming. And it's not good for their mental, emotional, psychological well-being. The Family Law Act in particular prioritizes, the only consideration regarding children is their best interest. And Section 37 of the Family Law Act lists factors, and one of them is the utmost protection of their psychological well-being, and what to minimize conflict in their lives, and the repercussions of such conflict post-separation. So I agree, it's not a good space to have children in, and you look at their ages, 4 and 6. You also look in the question, and the question talks about this is 3 months. And as Yuval and also Shalina have highlighted, this is a really intense, critical time in terms of just a recent breakup. And so a lot of things that are unsettled. Now, how this question is framed is about better communication. And so, could this be a situation where you have, 2 parents who have separated, who are just navigating a really difficult time? So newly, dealing with the fact of all of these, as both Yuval and Shalina have talked about, these really sacredly held things, their lives in terms of their family home, their relationships to each other no longer there, relationships to their children, finances, pressure. Could it be all of those things that are impacting and creating this very tense environment, recommunication? And maybe they might require, for example, the assistance of counselors, divorce coaches, or maybe some type of separation post separation parenting after separation support group or assistance. That may be one lens to look at that. But what I would say is to go a bit deeper with this, because what I want to know is, if I was a fly on the wall when this yelling and this kind of conflict happened, what would I see? And more importantly, what is the person experiencing in terms of this yelling, this escalation? So my concern, and Shalina mentioned this as well, is that there's a heightened risk for intimate partner violence just early post separation. And so the other question to ask is about the nature and dynamic that existed even before for this family. And is there a history of any kind of family violence or abuse? Has there been control? Has there been emotional, verbal, financial abuse, sexual abuse? Has there been other types of dynamics where that this interaction is not just a neutral communication piece, albeit, not, conflicted communication is an issue, but is this actually sitting in a place where there are safety concerns, risk concerns? When this conflict is happening, do you feel threatened? Do you feel unsafe? Do you feel like you're walking on eggshells? Do you feel at risk for harm for yourself or your children? These are larger underlying kind of red flags, and these require, I think, more conversation with potentially getting support and safety planning from advocates and support workers in this area in terms of anti-violence. There's organizations such as Battered Women Support Services and Ending Violence Association of BC that have great safety planning supports and advocates and counselors and support groups that provide assistance. And for lawyers, I would say it's really important to, when you're getting a question like this, to really listen and make space for having a conversation around family violence. And many people may not know that in the Family Law Act, there's a very comprehensive definition of family violence. And one of the primary concerns is around children witnessing violence, but also parents who are survivors of family violence and risks and harm to them. So I think it's very important to make sure you make space when these conversations are happening. And it may not just be about, it may start off as a question around how can we communicate, but it may be much more of a concern regarding safety and any risk of harm. And that might require a greater intervention to think comprehensively, because then the concerns are really how is the ongoing co-parenting situation going to happen, and how is there going to be protection of the safety concerns for both the children and the parent experiencing violence. So I think, a lot of these things I think about is, if I was a fly on the wall, what would I see? But also really getting the person who's talking to you to talk about how they're feeling about it. And sometimes people go to the communication part, which is sort of a head thing, like what skills do I need to communicate through this? But really, through a sort of trauma-informed lens, and one that looks at a comprehensive view of intimate partner violence and family violence, we really want to make space to kind of walk through and talk about how are you feeling, to really get down into how this interaction has impacted this person, and how they see it fitting in terms of maybe an ongoing pattern or history, or maybe emerging post-separation and the potential of it escalating. So I think the question requires much more than maybe just the communication piece, and it's important to go into that and ask those important questions and make space for it. And I would say to all those working with people who are separating, that it's an ongoing process. So if you do it once, and let's say, you might, it's not like you talk about these issues one time. You always check in about people's kind of safety, security, well-being, and are always touching base to make sure that they need support, they get the support and resources that are available.
Thank you so much, Zara. Zara, this next question is also for you, and it may go more into the how-to of communication. And it alludes to a scenario that you mentioned at the beginning of today's webinar. I'm divorced from my ex. I'm still angry about the way things ended. I would prefer never to see them again, but we own a number of properties together that we don't want to sell. What is the best way to deal with this?
It's a very good question, and I like myself, with Shalina and Yuval, are very supportive of counseling. So I also really, when someone comes to me, I want to know who their support system is. I want to know, and if they don't have a support system, whether it's family, friends, community, then to build that in terms of counseling support, because again, these are things that are often the most sacredly held things, that are all suddenly being dealt with the very, I would say, blunt tool of the law. The law is not a very nuanced, compassionate area, although it's trying to transform itself, but it doesn't have the ability to hold all that the experience of a separation and divorce someone will go through in a separation and divorce. So the fact that there's anger, especially after the settlement of things, is not surprising as well. Often at the end of a mediation, or even through a court process, or even sometimes collaborative processes, people sometimes look at what has happened and what the result of their negotiation or separation is, and they sometimes are not very happy about it, or there may be ongoing emotions towards their ex. So the situation regarding this is, if you know that you're going to end up owning some sort of property, in this case that they say that they have a number of properties together that they're not selling and that they're going to continue to own, then that's going to be one of those situations where they're going to be communicating with each other. And so it's really important, especially if there's, and again, I sort of flag as a caveat, if there are safety and other issues that are going on, then this is a much more complex discussion about preserving safety and communication. So if that's the concern, then it gets a more complicated answer. Um, but I think what you need to build in place, if you're going to have ongoing commitments from your separation, is a communication protocol. How are you going to communicate? How are you going to manage these properties? How are you agreeing to continue and carry on to deal with the property? So you may just say, for example, that you're not going to communicate directly to each other. You're going to communicate not over the phone or in person. You're going to communicate, in written form. So maybe by email. You might decide that you are going to have all major transactions built in to only be dealt with in terms of your legal counsel. You might end up saying, well, and again, I don't know how many properties we're talking about, but you might have someone hired to be a third-party manager to facilitate that process, so that you have the least amount of communication but are still engaged with the properties. The other piece is, you might put a time frame in and say, you know what, I'm going to try this out for like a year or 2 years within your agreement, and then we're going to reevaluate, and maybe you have an arrangement where either you sell the properties or your ex-spouse buys you out of the properties. There is a great value to your peace of mind, and there's a great harm to anything that's causing you ongoing emotional conflict and strife, and eating away at you. And so, I think getting counseling support to deal with that. But if it's an ongoing issue, it may be something that you go, well, you know what, I just don't want to have any connection. And you may be that person that we talked about in the beginning, who just wants to be able to have what's, called in the law like a clean break situation, albeit, needing to get emotional support for that clean break. So you may want to figure it out, but if you do have any ongoing assets you're going to have to administer, take care of, or deal with, definitely build that into when you're having a mediation, or you're doing a collaborative process, or even if you're negotiating with lawyers, to build in a really comprehensive framework around how you're going to deal with the communication, including reviews and potentially selling or buying out the asset. Because many people will come and say enough, to me, and their peace is much greater to them than the ongoing stress of an ongoing maintaining an asset with an ex-partner. And again, of course, if there are safety issues, then that's a definitely different red flag conversation around how you're going to do that without increasing any harm or risk to your safety.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Zara. The next question is for you, Shalina, and I just wanted to note the time. We've got about 20 minutes left, and we've got 5 questions, and I see there's a number of questions in the Q&A. So we'll keep going and hope to preserve some time for those questions coming in. Shalina, my ex has a new partner and seems less and less interested in our kids. I worry they're not getting enough attention, and that the new partner is driving a wedge between my ex and our kids. What can I do?
So this is a great question, because, you love your kids and you can see they're hurt, maybe when they come home and they haven't had the attention they wanted. So I think it depends, on the relationship you have with the ex, how old the kids are, the stage of the new partner, the relationship your ex has with the new partner. Like sometimes in the very beginning, there's this falling in love euphoria where they are only interested in the other person and they sort of forget about the kids a little bit. Or it could just be that the other partner the new partner doesn't understand the importance of the relationship the child has to the ex, in terms of the need for that child's development and growth, and that child's need for attention and love to thrive and to grow. So it depends. And so, just very quickly, depending on the child's age, you could get some support for the child to be able to have that conversation with the ex about wanting more time with them alone. You could try to talk to the ex sort of on an educational basis about how important it is for both of you, both parents, to be involved with the child. Or a trusted third party to try to talk. So there's a few different options, but and be clear about the perception. Like, you may not, again, you may be seeing that through your lens, and it may not be the case. So you want to make sure that you're checking that out before you start this conversation.
Beautiful, thank you. I love the idea of giving support to the child to have that conversation directly with the parent. Yuval, the next question is for you, and it's kind of the opposite scenario. If your ex has a new partner and the new partner is very involved with the kids, in this case, ages 7 and 9, should I start including the new partner in conversations about the children? I don't love the idea, but I want what's best for the kids.
Yeah. Well, for that, you need a roadmap, because it's really hard to navigate that. And it's hard to go by intuition. So generally speaking, I would say it's good for all the adults who care for the children to have an open line of communication. I think there's a safety in that. And I think the more eyes on the children, the better you can coordinate, particularly with an adult who lives in the same home as the children. So it makes a lot of sense to do that. However, a lot of kind of red flag and cautious. For example, I would say if you do that, it should be done gradually. So you don't kind of embrace the new adult and kind of making them a full kind of up to the level of, parents making decisions for the kids. I mean, you do it slowly and gradually. But even before that, just to be on a safe side, my suggestion is you go to your ex and you tell your ex, listen, so-and-so has been involved in our kid's life. I'd like to integrate him or her more into our conversation, our group chat. And I would actually ask the ex first, what do you think about that? Because, I mean, there's risk of what we call triangulation, of how that decision of involving the ex's new partner in our relationship, how that might affect that relationship between the ex and his partner. So it can be very complex, and maybe that ex is not ready for his partner to be that involved. So I would say it's actually your ex who should lead the way. So the first thing I would do, I would say, well, speak to your ex about that. Ask him or her, if that's something that, is it time? Is it reasonable? When you do involve the ex, I suggest that you be very cautious, to kind of make it primarily about the children, kind of more of like transactional, business oriented. There's a risk of becoming too much of a chum with your ex new partner. I've seen it many, many times. And I think you kind of really want to be mindful and aware of how you navigate this relationship, because 3 people in a relationship is always very tricky. So you really want to do it gradually, slowly. It is a good idea. Ask your ex first to start with that. Do it slowly. But do remember, doesn't matter how many friends or exes, boyfriend or girlfriend are involved, there are 2 parents. And the 2 parents are the one who's going to make the decision. And the 2 parents going to lead the pack. So respect that, think like that. And yes, do explore this option. I think it's going to increase the kind of network of safety around the children.
Beautiful. Thank you, Yuval. Zara, this next question is for you. Every time my ex-partner and I talk about our separation negotiations, they tell me I'm never going to get spousal support and I don't have any right to their income or business. I'm so stressed and worried about what they're telling me. What should I do?
Okay, I'm going to keep this really simple. Don't take legal advice from your ex. Full stop. Don't. Just don't. They are not your counsel. They are not giving you independent legal advice that's rooted in your best interest. You need to go to your lawyer and get that. You need independent legal advice. Someone who's just focused solely on your best interest can give you the parameters of your entitlements, tell you what the options, the pros and cons are, how to negotiate for that, and potential risks if you go to court and seek it, or potential optimistic case law that's there in your favor. Having an ex do this is someone who is undermining your confidence, at best, and at worst, engaging in controlling abusive behavior, trying to destabilize you, stress you out, make you vulnerable, put you at risk or fear of under negotiating or leaving things off the table completely because they have made you feel vulnerable or unsafe. So do not take legal advice from your ex at all, ever. Full stop.
Love it, Zara. I think everyone listening has now got the message loud and clear, and it's excellent, excellent advice. The next question is for you, Shalina. Here's a situation where you have somebody, I'm on much better footing now than I was when my ex and I divorced. Now I want more time and involvement with our kids who live full-time with my ex. Do I need to go to court, or are there other options?
So yes, there's absolutely other options. I would start by first talking to the other person. And then if that doesn't work, bringing in a third party, such as a mediator or perhaps a child specialist that can help you both decide what's in the best interest of the children. Before you do anything, I would suggest that you prepare, think about what it is you want and why it's in the best interest of the child. How is this going to be for the child? Ultimately, the parenting schedule has to be in the child's best interest. So some of the things to consider, how old are the children? Like some teenagers don't want to spend more time with either parent. They want to spend more time with their friends. And you might consider, so think about the change you want, how it's going to impact the child. Consider a slow and gradual approach, like, maybe just picking the kids up from activities or having them stay for dinner. And, instead of just announcing, like, I want the child 50% of the time, and what kind of reaction you might get, from the other parent if you were to sort of announce that. So it might be, to just try it to see how it is on the child and both parents in terms of their schedules. Once you've thought about it, and plan about how you're going to talk to the other parent about it, again, where, how, think about some tips about, staying calm, if they don't agree, not getting angry, trying to be polite, you're there for a purpose, all those things about, talking to your ex can be triggering. So really, trying to manage that part. And then, if that doesn't work, suggest bringing in a third party like a mediator, or if it's a specific issue with respect to the child and not really knowing what's in the best interest of the child, and another part of this is really important, the child's voice is really important to this, like what their preferences are. And so maybe you want a third party to interview the children and bring that voice to the table to help the parents understand what might work for everyone. If you do end up going to court, you may end up in a mediation process anyway, like in BC Provincial Court, you'll end up in mediation. So there's lots of options with respect to trying to change the schedule without jumping into court right away.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shalina. And our last question before we turn to live questions is for you, Yuval. It is, I was really close to my ex's parents. I want to visit them, but they've been banned from seeing me. What can I do?
Yeah, that goes back to the list of multiple losses when you separate, and this one might be one that you did not expect, or maybe you did. I mean, this is a major loss. I mean, you would consider those people as your family, and it's really painful to not having the same relationship with them. But again, I think you need to navigate that piece with mindfulness and kind of awareness. And I think that my rule is do not go behind your ex back. Don't reestablish relationship with the parents, if possible, behind their back. I think if you do so, then you risk of creating, again, a wedge between your ex and their parents, which is not good for you, not good for your children, not good for their relationship. And it might result in your children losing a relationship with their grandparents. So you never know how it's going to go. So I would say, first thing, do not do it behind your ex back. The other thing is I would wait for the in-laws or, cues. I mean, if they say, sure, can we reestablish relationship, reaching out to you and sending you an email, like, would you like to come? I would say that if there's a tense relation between them, or if you know that they were banned, then I would say I would love to do that. I really miss you guys. You've been an asset and you are considered as my family. I'd like you first to address it with your son or with your daughter, please. because it's really important for me that all of that relationship is doing above board. I don't want secrecy. There were enough secrets in our life. So please address it with your son or your daughter, and we'll take it from there. So I think you want to guide it with mindfulness. And, you know, I mean, the saddest stories that I hear is that sometimes that ex persist on not allowing their parents, and the parents are being caught as well in this horrible situation. I mean, they don't want to betray their son or their daughter, but at the same time, you know, they feel like, you know, how can we not have a relationship with the father or the mother of our grandchildren? So really complex situation. Do it and do it well. Don't do it behind anyone's back. Do it above board and try to be mindful and respectful as you move forward. And if you don't know how to navigate it and you try everything else, then reach out to a professional and ask them if maybe they have a better guidance how to help you with that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Yuval. And thank you everyone who has submitted questions. I'm going to start with one of the most upvoted questions. And Shalina, perhaps you wouldn't mind taking a crack at this one. And this question I imagine comes up often. Do you have tips for how to speak with the children about how the relationship has petered out and it's not their fault?
Yeah, I think, so basically what I'm understanding that question is how to tell the children that you're separating. Is that, and how to tell them in a way that and so, yeah, that is a really important conversation to have. And so, what I've seen work is that both parents doing it together in a very gentle way, you know, and it could be, and they have to think about it again, the planning is really important to that. They want to make sure absolutely that the children don't feel that it's their fault, and they want to leave their children out of the conflict. As you know, Zara and Yuval have mentioned earlier, like we really is to protect the children, that they don't feel they have to take sides, that they don't feel they're responsible for one parent or the other, to know that they're going to have time with both parents, that both parents love them and they will not lose one of the parents, those kinds of messages. And again, if parents want help with that, going to a professional to help them with that is also, you know, they can help them with how, and there's also resources online about how to talk to your children about this. It's a really important piece. Because you do want to protect the children in this process. It's very hard for children to go through this and to witness the conflict, but knowing that they're going to be safe, that both parents are going to be in their lives, that both parents love them, will make it much easier for the children.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shalina. I'm going to turn to the next question, and I think there's I'll read it first. How do you deal with a narcissist ex who doesn't pay child support and wants to control everything, including cell phone apps, and disagrees with everything you present in a child's best interest? And I guess there's a couple of things that jump out to me, one being the component of dealing with somebody who perhaps isn't narcissist, and then the other half being perhaps the more legal question. We may have time to sort of touch on this a little bit. Yuval, do you want to maybe start with the narcissist question, and then Zara, if it's okay, I'll turn to you for the legal component. Thank you.
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question.
Bearing in mind, we only have about 4 minutes.
That's
I'm so sorry.
Question. So, okay, so let me start with saying that, listen, although some behavior appears to be compatible and consistent with behavior of somebody who is like narcissist or sociopath or personality disorder, first thing I would suggest all of us should be very careful about using those labels. Once you use this label, I mean, it's hard to kind of backpedal. So just, you know, I would say there are many behaviors who resemble like a narcissist traits, but you know, we need to be very careful not to call it a narcissist, because then we attach a mental health label, et cetera, and it's rather complex. But generally speaking, with anyone whose communication with them is difficult, you know, we recommend that you use, you know, you can use an app to discuss things, so you should not discuss it in person. We always recommend that you have brief communication to the point, and always kind of make sure that it's compact, like you don't open it up for more opportunity to discuss kind of more complex thing about your relationship. So Bill Eddy wrote a lot of books about dealing with the high conflict, dealing with the personality disorder. He has his own system of how to do it, and maybe that should be in the resource list. So generally speaking, you would like the conversation to be brief, informative, and businesslike. So that's what I say so far about that question.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And Zara, I know we don't really have time to get into the legal component of it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this question.
Just very quickly, child support is the legal right of a child. So you can't contract out of it. You can't just say you don't want to pay it. I would say that out of all areas that have some clarity, there's not many that in family law that have some clarity, but child support is one of them. And so there are avenues to go through provincial court to obtain child support, which are going to be less expensive, and you can self-represent and get some assistance, and maybe get some assistance in terms of legal aid to go and pursue that. So you might want to navigate that piece. That being said, identifying the person that you've identified and their behaviors, I don't know if there's underlying issues also, again, of abuse or control or financial abuse that are playing out here. So you probably want to work with an advocate, an anti-violence advocate, to talk about how to, even before you kind of launch an application to try and get support or confirm support or enforce support, you probably want to have some safety planning and some support in place to think about how you're going to proceed, and to sort of safeguard yourself and your children when you start to seek your entitlements. Because it's easy for me to say go and seek the entitlements, but there are repercussions, and I know that you need to have support in place to be able to even try to get those entitlements that are in the law. But child support is a right of children, and they should be able to, they have a right to access the sharing of those funds from parents.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We're at 1 o'clock now. We will officially conclude today's session. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.